Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to take a look at Dawn of Majesty, just a bit of an overview of the set and sort of my opinions on where it's at in pre-release week. I do think it's been a relatively interesting trend to watch. The prices drop as usual, but there's been a few that have held strong. This set doesn't look like it has any like $90 card on pre-release, similar to what Diviner was, and obviously Prosperity and sets earlier, but it does seem to have a decent variety, and I think overall the secret rares in this set are much better than the secret rares in Lightning Overdrive, especially because some of them may actually be more impactful as we go into further sets, like Burst of Destiny. And I think overall it's not going to be a bad set, but people that are expecting it to be massively profitable outside of Starlight should probably lower their expectations. That being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the actual set as a whole. I think the secret rares are always the most hyped for the most part, maybe 97% of the time. I mean, sometimes you have an ultra that's really good, but typically ultras in the newer sets do end up being really affordable early on. There's, a decent amount of ultras in the set, but I don't think any are pre-selling above $10, and I'm not even sure there's too many that are pre-selling above $5. I think the secrets are where you really kind of focus your attention early. So interestingly enough, Aluber the Jester of Despia is one of the most hyped cards in the set. If you see, there have been a ton of sales pre-selling around the $50 mark. It is a really, really good card, and it gets a lot better with the next set with the new Despia support in Burst of Destiny. Basically, if this card is normal or special, you can search a branded spell or trap, so I think there's a small handful of them. But what I really like about it, of course, is if a fusion monster you control is destroyed by battle or leaves the field by an opponent's card effect while this card is in the graveyard, you target an opponent's effect monster, revive this card, and if you do, negate that targeted monster's effects until the end of the turn. What really makes this unique is, of course, the fact that Despia is entirely based on fusion summoning, and if your opponent does manage to get over your cards, you can not only revive this back, but you can negate something on the field. The fact that it targets does make it a little bit trickier to resolve than, say, Skystriker Ace Ray, which functions similarly when you get over one of the Skystriker links, but I think this card will be solid within its own archetype, and I'm just curious to see where the price settles. If you're asking me, and again, this is all just sort of my own personal take on it, I'm not giving any advice specifically, telling you what I would do and what I probably am going to do with some of these cards, I would hold off on buying this at 47. I do think we'll see it drop closer to 40 as the pre-release prices kind of fall out a bit and the set is massively cracked open. It wouldn't shock me to see it go lower to 30, to be honest. I don't see it going too much lower below that early on, especially because the gap between this set and Burst of Destiny is shorter than your usual set gap. But this is going to be a card you're going to want to have in some capacity. I just think it would behoove you to wait and see what the price actually dips to, because there's almost no shot this spikes on release. If anything, it'll stay the same, so you can think it over a little bit more, make sure this is something you actually want to pick up, and then if it does end up staying around the $50 mark, at least you're not paying, a higher amount than you would have been if you bought them now. I think it was pre-selling on Yu-Gi-Oh! Daily and a few other sites around 35. If you manage to secure those pre-sale prices, it's definitely not the worst. At least your risk is a little bit lower, but you can save yourself some money. I think Aluber is going to be a driving factor behind this set over time. It just remains to be seen whether or not that will take effect before Burst of Destiny. The Iris Sword Soul, I've talked about this card at length, both in articles on YuGiOhMeta.com as well as on the channel itself. I think this card is really solid. I think it has a ton of potential long term. It synergizes extremely well with the, I think it's the Zhang or the Zhanjing archetype that comes out in Burst of Destiny. But overall, it's a decent hand trap that can summon itself with conditions that are extremely easy to meet. And that existing sort of means you have a really good chance of being able to resolve this card and get some benefits from it. Of course, there is the fact that it does have a sort of niche fit in terms of what it stops. It doesn't stop things so much as it generates advantage for you, and when you're picking your hand traps for a deck, you're probably going to end up going with something like Bell, Ash, Gamma over this early on, which is why I do think, as much as I really like the card, you probably can wait for this too. A little bit lower, I think it could end up hitting around 30, 35. It does have the whole waifu thing going for it, and just being a hand trap that's a secret rare in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Means it's going to have hype behind it no matter what. I wouldn't blame you if you pick these up, and you see a lot of people have bought them in the past few days at the $50 mark. There have been a substantial amount of sales, but if you see, a lot of people were selling them at 30 as well. Those went quick, but I'm guessing those were people that were okay with just making the sales during the initial sort of, pre-release price listing thing that happens on the first weekend. The whole point, though, is that while they are selling at 50, a lot of them have sold at 30, showing people are willing to sort of compete on those prices, and right now there's only 11 listings. When you think about the fact that in a few days this is going to be massively cracked open, that will change tremendously. Ready Fusion is one I am super high on, and I'm actually considering buying some myself now, but I have decided to wait just a little, particularly because on eBay, this is around 35 to 40 bucks. And so if you are going to buy them right now, I would definitely advise looking around before making that purchase, just because TCG Player tends to have them high. They are selling, which shows me that a lot of people aren't looking around and doing their due diligence in terms of finding the best price for themselves. But I think Ready Fusion is a slept-on card that is going to be absolutely impactful, even if it's not doing anything right away. The OCG, it's not seeing play in everything, but I also think it's a card that's going to be format dependent, and whether or not the targets it can bring out actually do anything to advance a deck's win condition. I like the idea of playing this with things like Sea Monster of Theseus to go into Ultimaya, and, we have a lot of tuner plays, a lot of different cards you can grab, including the new Fusion Monster from this set, so I think this will end up being the best card in the set over time in terms of value, if Instant Fusion is anything to look at. I would say if you're going to spend the money on something, you could probably do a lot worse than Ready Fusion. I do think it will be hyped for a while. Obviously, there won't be any reprints of this card for a long time, at least a year, if not more, and it's probably going to be something you're going to want to have at some point. But before you make any purchases of it here, I would again caution you to look around and see what you can find, because the market price for this is selling around 40. Obviously, people are trying to make whatever sales they can, and I don't fault them for that, but a little bit of competitive pricing is pretty good. B-Trooper Scout Buggy is at 22 bucks. That makes me super happy to see. This is an insanely good card. It's a tour guide for insects, and it does so much, especially within the archetype that has just gotten a really solid first run of support. If they continue to give us good waves of support, that'll be even better. And I do think Scout Buggy has potential over time to end up rising towards the top of the set, but I also think that once this set releases, it will drop a little bit lower, and you should be able to grab these around 12 to 15 early on. We'll see whether or not that lasts and what type of things people put together, but I think the long-term viability of B-Troopers in general is highly dependent on the future waves of support that we get. Stardust Synchro, huge fan of. I've talked about this before. Nice to see the prices dropped a bit down to 24. They were selling at 40 about 5 days ago. This is a really good card. It's a bit niche in terms of its uses, but it looks cool. It's iconic because it's Stardust, and I think this will be something that people will want, but there's no way this price holds. This should probably drop down to around $15, if not a bit lower. But it is a card I would recommend grabbing if it does get cheap enough where you can pick it up and get a playset for, say, under $50. I think it will have its uses over time, being a tuner that's relatively generic and can really boost synchro decks in general. So that's my thoughts on that. Shooting Majestic Star Dragon is a beautiful card. I love the artwork. This is a cover card that people are going to want to have. It's also got the Starlight print, which is cool. $20 right now, give or take. This card will probably be $10 on release, just like Blood Rose Dragon was in Lightning Overdrive. So unless you, for some reason, anticipate needing this immediately, just wait a few days. It will drop, and I don't think you can really go wrong with picking this up because of what it is and the fact that it has both collector's value and some type of competitive value. This will be a card that people will want, and I think it will eventually kind of bubble back up over time like the Synchros typically do. But again, if you can wait, I would recommend waiting. Arrive in Light has dropped to about 12 bucks. I think it might drop a little lower than that. It is a really good card for the Stardust decks, but it is kind of specific in its application, and not every secret can have value, so that's my thought on this. Just wait. You might be able to get this around $7 to $8, and I think it's a decent pickup. I mean, over time, again, anything that's got the Stardust Dragon support linked to it typically will probably have some type of collector's value, and this is a secret rare, so yeah. I mean, you could do worse. It does a lot for synchro decks, and you might want to keep your eye on the price and see if it gets a little bit lower. Synchro Overtake has shocked me so far at $60, but I want to point out that the trending prices show a bunch of listings have sold at $30, meaning sellers are willing to take a cut in order to make sales. This is not going to stay $60 right on release, I don't think. I think this set's going to be starving for value after things settle, but this card isn't even the best secret in the deck, in my opinion. In the set, in my opinion. I think Ready Fusion is better, and I wouldn't be surprised to see this kind of bubble down a little bit. It is solid. You can get a synchro material specifically from the deck, but I don't even know off the top of my head, like, I don't think I could name you more than like 5 that are listed as specific material that are going to be usable with this in a way that generates you significant advantage early on. Obviously, being able to search out Synchron cards is cool. I question the viability of this card long term and would caution you to not spend $60 on it unless you just have money to burn and don't care. But then you're reinforcing the market price on this. I do think it's a really good card. I am a little worried it might be a little bit overhyped in terms of its meta impact. So I know that probably is a bit of a different take than what's usually being said, but that's just where I'm at with it. The AntiHuman Intelligence Messiah, I really like this card a lot in terms of being a somewhat decent pendulum effect. It does counter Sky Strikers and Paleo, I guess, to an extent. It's not as good as Macrocosmos. I think people need to understand that, but it is relatively generic in terms of what it can do for pendulums, and I think it's neat enough, but I do think it will drop quite a bit before it spikes anywhere. This card should be $10 to $12 upon release, and as a result, I would avoid paying the pre-sale prices. A lot of people have. Some people paid $50 a piece on this back on August 2nd. That is unfortunate, but it is a really good card. It's just, it's going to end up going the route of things like Book of Lunar Eclipse and Dark Honest, where it's like a neat secret that people will want, but again, not everything can have value. A couple of ultras seem neat. Stardust Illumination, I do like being able to send a Stardust monster from deck to grave. You can mill things like Stardust Xiaolong or Synchron. It's not bad at all, and it does allow you to modify the levels of your Stardust Dragons, but it's an ultra that's 5 on pre-release, meaning it will likely drop to about $2 to $3, and it will be super affordable. So if you do want it, and I would recommend maybe picking up a playset, just wait until the price settles. Grand Soulful Chord Musekia, obviously people like this archetype both for its, waifu appeal and just the fact that it's overall a cute pendulum archetype that will likely get more support over time, and this is more so generic in terms of being a light version of Heavy Metal Foe's Electromite. It is decent enough, and I think $5 may be where it settles after a while, but right now I do expect it to dip out a bit more, similar to the Trap Tricks Links and Lightning Overdrive. Again, it's a good card, I just wouldn't go crazy for it right now. But I do think if you can pick these up at $1 or $2 on the release, it would be a good long-term hold. Bee Trooper Sting Lancer is $5 as well. I think this card is nuts. If Bee Trooper does take off, I could see this easily going up towards $10, but it will not do that before it goes down first. I think the trends are pretty straightforward with the way this set goes, and I mean, we've even seen it with good cards like Live Twin Frost. It went down and then went back up, which I think will happen here. So I would say maybe, again, wait on this unless you plan on building the deck. I mean, $5 isn't terrible for a card that's as useful as this card is, but see if you can snag them around 3, you get a playset for less than 10, and then you're really talking about a solid deal looking towards the future with more Bee Troopers. And Magic Key World, another really solid card. I mean, it's basically the tanky for Magic Key. That deck does have potential to take off at some point, and $5 isn't awful on this, actually. I think it will drop a little bit more, pretty much similar to everything in the set, obviously, but I'm looking more towards a month or two out versus just where it's going to be on release weekend. People very often will look at the price on release weekend and say everything is a flop, but I think we need to acknowledge that sets evolve over time versus just being instantly expensive when they come out, and I think for Yu-Gi-Oh! That's actually pretty good because it does reduce the likelihood of things being scalped and makes it so that you can actually get your hands on cards that you as a player want to be able to use. So yeah, overall, just taking a brief overview look at Dawn of Majesty, I am pretty excited for the set. There are some cards in it I'm definitely looking forward to getting. I will have a box opening on the channel, although I believe it will be delayed. I'm going to be out of town release weekend, so unless it comes in early, which I doubt, I won't be able to get that up until Sunday or Monday. But do I recommend the set as a whole? Yeah, I mean, if you've got a little bit of extra money to spend and you can get a box under 65 bucks or close to it, it's definitely worthwhile. I think looking long term, you may be able to get some value back, but I would say this is more so as a player. Like, if you're looking to get some of this stuff and hopefully to have it for deck building purposes going on the line, do I want to recommend buying this as a sealed investment? Not really, but you do have the Stardust Dragon as a Starlight Rare, which I think over time will age really well, so you could see the value of sealed boxes for this set go up in the long term, maybe like 5 years or so, 3 years, whatever, depending on how Stardust takes off. So that's my overall just kind of, analysis of Dawn of Majesty. I do like this set a lot. It's better than Lightning Overdrive, it's better than Blazing Vortex, and I do think it's better than the Phantom Reach set as well, but obviously it doesn't hold a candle to sets like Rise of the Duelist and Eternity Code, and I've seen it compared to Dark Neostorm. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I do think it'll be a little better than Dark Neostorm long term, but we will have to see how it shakes out. Let me know what you guys think. Are you planning on buying some of this? Are you going to hold off? What are your plans? What are you thinking? Drop a comment down below and I will try to interact with everyone, and thank you so much for watching. Please like the video if you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time right here at Loveshack.